On a frigid dawn in 1654, the bells of Uppsala Cathedral in Sweden tolled with an uncharacteristic heaviness. Before the eyes of a stunned populace, a 28-year-old woman reached up and, with her own hands, removed the ponderous gold crown from her brow. There were no tears, no flickers of hesitation. Instead, her gaze held a crystalline coolness, the look of one suddenly unburdened. This was Queen Christina of Sweden. Tonight, as we sit by the rhythmic pulse of the hearth, let us journey through this effortless narrative into her true life. She was the most celebrated paradox of her age, a reigning sovereign who yearned to traverse ancient ruins like a wandering scholar, the heir to the mantle of Protestant leadership who, upon abdicating, secretly embraced the Catholic faith. Why would a lioness at the apex of absolute power tear off her own fur to become a homeless wanderer? As she once declared, "I was not born to rule, I was born for freedom." The fissures in her story were buried deep within the moment of her birth. When Christina entered the world, she was covered in lanugo, her cries so raspy and forceful that the midwife proclaimed her a boy. Yet when her father, the great Gustavus Adolphus, learned the truth, he felt no disappointment. He decreed, "Raise this girl as a true prince." Consequently, Christina's childhood was devoid of dolls and lace. It was forged of long swords, saddles, and endless streams of Latin. This upbringing endowed her with a robust constitution and an erudition that eclipsed her male peers, but it also bred a visceral rejection of traditional feminine roles. She would gaze at her cropped hair in the mirror and at the courtly rituals taken for granted by others, feeling a biological sense of suffocation. She was not merely Sweden's ruler, she was a philosopher trapped within a gilded cage. She sought refuge in voracious reading until she encountered the man who would reshape her psyche, René Descartes. That relentless pursuit of pure reason led her to a startling realization: the throne was merely a different configuration of shackles. Christina's disdain for power became an open defiance when she refused to wed. Her ministers clamored for a marriage, demanding she secure the lineage of the House of Vasa. But to Christina, marriage was synonymous with submission, becoming an appendage to another man. Her response was unyielding: "I would rather die than bear children." In that era, such a sentiment was viewed as an act of national treason. To combat this mounting pressure, she retreated into an almost obsessive intellectual life. Rising at 5 each morning in the freezing palace, she engaged Descartes in profound debates regarding the duality of soul and body. This austere rationality allowed her to see through the hollow hypocrisy of political theater. She began to clandestinely plot her escape, not out of weakness, but out of a strength too vast for her station. She would relinquish all of Sweden to her cousin in exchange for the chance to roam the European continent as a free scholar. To the world, this was madness. To her, it was the only path to salvation. On the day of her abdication, Sweden wept, but Christina smiled. She donned masculine attire, cropped her hair short, and crossed the border on a galloping steed. In the long odyssey that followed, she was no longer Queen Christina, but a mysterious traveler known as Count Donna. She traversed the bustle of Hamburg, the dense forests of France, and finally reached the eternal city Rome. There, her public conversion to Catholicism sent a seismic shock through the landscape of international politics. Yet for her, religion was a philosophical deliberation. In Rome, she established her own salon, patronizing virtuosos and scientists, and even dared to discuss forbidden texts within the very heart of the Vatican. Her deliberate blurring of gender, wearing men's boots and riding astride like a cavalier, became the most peculiar sight on the Roman streets. It was here she found a kindred spirit in Cardinal Azzolino, the only soul who ever approached what might be called love in her life. Theirs was a bond of intellectual mutualism, a pure connection unconstrained by carnal desire. Yet, freedom is never granted without a price, especially for one who has stood upon the mountain's peak. Christina's life in Rome was not merely a bed of roses. She soon found herself ensnared in financial insolvency. She attempted to intervene in the Polish succession and was even embroiled in a dark murder scandal at Fontainebleau. When she realized that despite shedding her royal robes, she was still being pulled into the vortices of power, her sense of isolation became agonizingly acute. She discovered that the world did not become more tolerant simply because she had abdicated. People still scrutinized her masculine dress with voyeuristic eyes and whispered venomous rumors about her private affairs. She confided in her diary, "I am a person who belongs to everyone, yet belongs nowhere." She turned to the mysteries of alchemy, searching for the ultimate answers to existence within the rising vapors of her crucibles. She grew increasingly detached and cool. Only when walking alone at midnight amidst the ruins of Rome did she find a fragment of peace. She ceased trying to persuade the world. She wished only to grow old quietly in some forgotten corner of it. In 1689, Christina reached the end of her mortal journey in Rome. On her deathbed, she rejected the grandiose funeral prepared by the Pope, requesting instead the simplest of epitaphs. Yet, in the end, she was interred within the crypts of St. Peter's Basilica, one of the very few women ever accorded such an honor. To this day, people look upon her sarcophagus and debate whether she was a saint or a madwoman. In truth, she was merely a modern soul born in the 17th century, attempting to live with a dignity and selfhood ahead of her time. She spent 28 years in rule to repay her lineage, and the remaining 35 years searching for herself. The beauty of her solitude sprang from a total rupture, a break from the past, and a break from the expectations of gender. The agony brought by this severance finally calcified into an eternal statue beneath the Roman sunset. In that final hour, her life completed its metamorphosis from a lioness into a sage. Christina has departed. That most lucid of northern souls has finally ceased its restless contemplation. She left behind more than mere controversies and legends. She left a philosophy of relinquishment. She teaches us that when you find the seat the world has assigned you to be ill-fitting, you have every right to stand up and walk away. True power is not the command of 10,000 legions, but the mastery of one's own destiny. To answer the riddle of the prologue, did she find serenity? Perhaps in the baptism of her conversion, she did not find a god, but she certainly found an inner peace. Can you, at this moment, feel that cool and liberated strength echoing across 3 centuries? The world has fallen silent, and it is time for you to set down the burdens of the day. Tonight, may you, like Christina after her abdication, cast off every encumbrance and enter a dreamscape free of prejudice. Good night.